Welcome you to the Theosophical Society again this evening. The Theosophical Society, for those of you that are new in the building, I think I see a couple of them, is the objects of the society is to promote or provide a basis for the universal brotherhood of mankind without any distinctions whatsoever. And in that capacity, we try to present programs which are searching into the philosophical and religious aspects, occult or esoteric traditions of all philosophies and religions around the world without any political guidelines or without any doctrinary differences. We don't try to decide for you which is the right thing and which is the wrong thing. We present them to you in the hopes that you'll use the information to awaken your own latent abilities, which is another one of our prime objects. And tonight we have with us Dr. Gordon Plummer, who was born in Point Loma on the Theosophical Commune, really, 600 members strong at one point, with the Theosophical University, Raja Yoga School, complete and total community of Theosophy, which I think left San Diego in the early 40s. Existed from 1900 until 1940. If I can give out your age, I think you were born in 1904.
That is right.
At Point Loma.
Let them take it from there.
Right. Dr. Plummer has been is a founder or a co-founder, I suppose, of the science.
Well, I hold a founder's membership. There are many who do, but it was actually founded some years before I'd heard of it.
Oh, wow.
So I was born some years before they'd heard of me.
Okay, that's fair. Of the science, what is it, the science?
The Hall of Science.
Hall of Science in Balboa Park. And he's spoken to us on many occasions before. Tonight he's speaking to us seasonally on the esoteric aspects of Easter, which usually we don't hear such topics. We're usually hearing topics on Christmas, but not too many talks on the Easter. At least we haven't heard any here for quite some time. It's also in line with the Passover festival, which begins Wednesday. It's in line with several other festivals around the world of different religions, and I'll let him get into those aspects. Dr. Plummer was studied under G.D. Peruker here at the Point Loma University, who was the president of the Point Loma Theosophical Society. I don't know if we can give any greater references to his knowledge on it. We'll let him speak for himself on the rest of it. With that, is that sufficient introduction for you? There will be a question and answer period afterwards, so please hold your questions until then, but please don't hold them at that time. Is it getting awful hot in here? No? Just
Thank you. You make me think of the speaker who was going on for quite a while, and he called for the question and answer period, and a hand went up. He said, "Yes, what was your question?" "Yes, what is the time, please?" So I'm going to try not to make that mistake. But seriously, now, we have chalk here.
right next to you, on the end, in the hole.
Oh, yes, fine. In our discussion of the esoteric Easter in its relation to the spring equinox, we are going to be treading on holy ground in thought and in our study. We are going to be reaching back into the traditions which far preceded the Easter, or the Passover, as Andreas pointed out. And I think I will not take the time to explain how Easter came to take the form that it now has, because I would be taking from what it seems to me is going to be an exceedingly interesting and important study. I will merely point out that in relation to the date on which Easter is set, we have a dimly remembered fact of the mystery schools. Easter always comes on the first Sunday following the first full moon after the spring equinox. the earliest Easter could possibly come would be if the full moon were on the March 21st, and that happened to be on a Sunday. That would be the earliest Easter could possibly come. Sometimes it will come a month or more later, but it can come anywhere in that time period. Well, of course, this is an arrangement of convenience, because Sunday is usually the day of worship for many of the religions of the world. And so the esoteric fact was more or less set aside for the convenience of the day, of the week. And if we were to approach the study of Easter from the truly esoteric standpoint, we would discover that the 2-week period from new moon to full moon is the important time for the Easter season, as it is the important time for the Christmas season, December 21st, or the new moon closest to it, and then the full moon following. The ideal situation would be if the new moon were to fall on the actual date of either the solstices or the equinoxes. And we seem to stress just 2 of these important seasons, the winter and the spring, but actually we are going to learn that there is a cycle of the year which I'm going to represent as a circle with a cross. And this would represent what we call the cosmic cross. And since the Earth on its orbit moves in a counterclockwise direction, the sun rises in the east, this would be west. Let's just call this spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Now this is the cosmic cross, as it has often been called. Now there's nothing artificial about this. Those who have studied the matter most deeply, those from whom we receive our teachings, tell us that at these particular times of the year, conditions are most appropriate to the practice of the mysteries and the benefits to be derived from a practice of the traditions of the mysteries. The mysteries have always existed, and they always will. And even though they are not so well known, generally speaking, because we don't seem to have extant mystery schools such as we have studied in the past, like Eleusis, Samothrace, Mithraic mysteries, and so forth, there seems to be nothing at the present time, although I think that I will touch on something that might give us some food for thought. Nevertheless, whether working openly or in secret, the mystery schools have always existed, we are taught. Now, the mysteries are of 2 kinds, the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries. And in the various levels of the mysteries, both lesser and greater, at this particular type of study that we're undergoing this evening, we may properly say there are 7 levels of initiation in the mysteries. And the first 3 levels concern themselves with discipline, with study, with teaching, with learning to lead a life of service. Self-forgetfulness is the key. Dedication to the principle of ultimate human perfectibility, as H.P.B. herself put it to us. And in the first 3 degrees, it is an ever-increasing training, an ever-increasing in intensity and in purpose. And not only were the aspects of study and discipline but also drama. And we have the mystery drama as depicting the esoteric life of the student, the various incidents in the life of a student as he progresses through the various levels of the mysteries, the 3 preliminary levels of the lesser mysteries, and the 4 greater levels of the greater mysteries. And because of this, we are told that the incidents in the lives of the great ones, such as the life of Jesus the Christ, the incidents as related are really part of a tale from the mysteries. And we are going to inquire into that more specifically as it relates to the Easter time. But what we are trying to discover in our study this evening is not only that the mysteries are worldwide, they know neither age nor race. They are confined to neither of these. They are universal. And the whole tenor, the whole impetus of training in the mystery schools is universality of thought and feeling and of life. To transcend the limitations of the personal life, dedicate oneself to an awareness of, an identification with the universality of thought. That's the whole intent. And these mystery dramas, and the one that comes to my mind, probably because it's the one within which I'm most familiar, and we gave it at Point Loma many times in our Greek theater, was the Eumenides by Aeschylus. He wrote a trilogy, but this was the one that we presented. And we were taught all through the years as we presented this so many times in the Greek theater. It was one of the mystery tales, one of the mystery plays. And these mystery plays held a very, very high and important part in the training of the disciple. Now, there's one other thought that I just want to bring out before we get into this more specifically. And that is that there is a reason for the structure of the mystery schools, the way they were planned, the way they were operated, because they were planned and operated on nature's own plan. And because man is also a part of nature and patterned after nature, the mystery school was related to man as an individual and to nature in general. That is the reason for the structure of the mystery schools. And I imagine that this plan would hold pretty well throughout, but the one that happens to have appealed to me the most, just because of the bent of my own mind in the mathematical direction, the mystery school of Plato was a primary example of exactly what I mean, what I want to try to convey. There was the outer work, the work for the public lectures. And the people who came were the listeners. And so they were called the acousmatikoi. And we have our word acoustics from this, the listeners. And they were the interested people who came and who perhaps hoped to deserve a place in the mystery school itself. And in time, perhaps they would join. Then there was the school itself, the temple, and it was composed of the students who were really studying under Pythagoras. They were known as the mathematikoi. And of course, it's obvious to you, we have our word mathematics cognate with this, mathematikoi. And they were those who studied. As we have been taught, very little has been actually handed down to us in writing of the school of Pythagoras, but they studied music, harmony, mathematics, but most especially they studied a way of life. And one of the most important injunctions of Pythagoras to his pupils was, never let your eyes close in sleep until you have been over all the events of the day and studied yourself. recognize those areas in which you perhaps failed, made an error, study it, see where you might have done better, resolve to do better and learn by the mistakes. Recognize the good that has been done, build on it. Because we can err by paying too much attention to our weaknesses. Our strengths are also there. And this injunction that Pythagoras gave to his students is one that is applicable to anyone, everywhere, anywhere, at any time. It's a very, very good practice in honest self-appraisal. Then, in the inner life of the school, in the Holy of Holies, the Sanctum Sanctorum, Pythagoras taught. He revealed himself as the teacher. And those were the deeply dedicated ones, those who had a real glimpse of the mysteries. Now that threefold division of the mystery schools is quite in line with at least an elementary approach to the nature of man. The outer self, the personality. It includes also the body, the vital astrophysical part, as we study in our theosophical teachings. Then there is the temple itself, what we call the human being, the real person. He who re-embodies time and time again in the school of life that he may learn, that he may grow, and that he may achieve one thing of the greatest importance of all. And that touches on that part of man that is the highest of all, his inner God, his own Holy of Holies. So in this sense, man is himself a mystery school. And every man, every woman, every child who is awake, who knows, who has some concept of the spiritual values of life, not only can be, but should be a mystery school, as complete in his own makeup as the mystery school was in its pattern and in its development and in the manner in which its studies and its work was carried on. Then that relates to nature itself. The outer court of nature is the physical world that we see, and we know that the atoms are everywhere, not only this earth, by the uncountable billions and trillions and quadrillions and squintillions. But atoms are everywhere in the universe. But they form the outer court, as it were. Then there are the inner energies, the inner forces of nature, which relate to the temple itself in the mystery school. And in those inner realms, and as we study in our theosophical teachings about the various planes of consciousness, we don't have time this evening to be specific about it, but the concept of globe chains is familiar probably to almost everyone here. But on these inner levels of life, an increasing spirituality, less and less emphasis on the material, on the physical, greater and greater emphasis on the spiritual, that is like the temple of the mystery school. And then finally, there is the Holy of Holies, the very highest universality in nature, which in our theosophical parlance we call Parabrahman, or sometimes we just call it that, T-H-A-T, in contradistinction to this, which is the universe. That is the Holy of Holies in the universe toward which we all aspire, and with which we have an indissoluble link. And it seems to me that the keynote in meditation is to discover that while man is the embodiment, the expression of human consciousness, the universe is the expression of universal consciousness. But every man has within himself a spark of the universal. And in genuine meditation, which is the beginning of the treading of the path to the mystery schools, we are trying to find the universal in ourselves. When we find the universal in ourselves, then we become not only convinced because we've read that it is so, because we've heard someone say that it is so, But we become aware of the existence of the inner God, that universality within each one of us that we call the Atman. We become aware of it because we discover that all feelings of compassion, all manifestation of genuine genius, all truly constructive work is made possible because of the energies flowing through us from the inner God. And once we recognize that for what it is, then we become filled with a joy of living, a joy of service, a joy of companionship with the highest within ourselves. And that ultimately is the only key to genuine spiritual growth. And as we tread that pathway, we are becoming more and more aware of the source of it all on the universal scale. We discover what brotherhood really means. Now, touching on this then, when a student has passed through the first 3 levels known as the lesser mysteries, by the time he has reached on to the 3rd level, you might say that he has finally passed the point of no return. He is committed. You might say up to that time, well, there's still enough of the worldliness in him. He could forsake it perhaps for a lifetime, but if he has gone into this training with any degree at all, even if he temporarily forgets it and sets it aside for other interests, it will find him out. In future lives, he will take it up again. He will continue the work. Finally, when he reaches the point of no return, then he is ready to experience the things that he has been taught. And there is the great difference. When he is taught, he is learning. He has reverence for those who teach him. But the day will come when he must experience what he has been taught. And when that day comes, he is ready to step over into the greater mysteries. And he will discover then that there are 4 great initiations. And the winter initiation related to the winter solstice is what one might call the 4th level in the ladder of growth of the mystery schools. And the events relating to that initiation are represented in the story of the Christmas time. And we should touch on it only because it does lead to the story of the Easter time. And we have, of course, the tale so well known to everyone of the virgin birth, and that is really one of the incidents among many in the life of Jesus that is a hint of the greater mysteries. And no one probably in this room takes the matter of the virgin birth literally. The boy was born, as all children are born, with a natural father and a mother. But the tale of the virgin birth has another meaning. It is a kind of a second birth, a birth into the life of the Spirit. And there is the counterpart in the Eastern religions and philosophies. A Dvija is one who is twice born. Not only born physically, but also born into the spiritual life. That is what is represented in the story of the virgin birth, which relates particularly to the Easter time, the Christmas time. Now, the birth in the manger is only another way of indicating something that is common to all the great religions, or at least many of them, where the initiation takes place in a place of seclusion, or possibly a cave. In the case of the story of Jesus, the Avatar, it was the manger. Sometimes this is represented as meaning the crypt of the temple, the room below. And initiations in some of the mystery schools were held in the crypt of the temple. All of this being pointed to in the story of the birth, the humble birth of some of the world teachers. In the Egyptian, I think that Isis was the virgin, and she was the mother of Osiris. If I'm mistaken on that, some of you scholars will correct me. But anyway, that for the Christmas time. There is no indication at all that Christ was born on the night of the 24th of December. There's no historic evidence. But the very fact that this is celebrated so close to the winter solstice, it really means the initiation that took place at the time of the winter solstice. Now, in these initiations, we have a very interesting thing, and this is really represented in the symbolism used by the Rosicrucians. How many of them may remember? I'm trying to represent a rose here. Rosicrucian simply means the rosy cross. The rose representing here the human monad at the time of initiation. And the esoteric meaning of the crucifixion, rather than the cruel death of a Savior by being nailed to a cross, really means that the human monad, the human entity undergoing initiation, is on the cosmic cross, and that the great initiations he is to pass through will be held at these sacred seasons of the year. Now, it does not follow that once having been initiated at the Christmas time, that the very next springtime he goes into the next initiation, and the very next summer. Actually, several lifetimes of service and of work may elapse between the winter solstice initiation and the time when he is ready for the spring. It is a matter of growth. It is a matter of readiness. And one might say that initiations are undertaken perhaps for 2 or 3 reasons. Not only for the benefit of the neophyte, the one who is to undergo initiation, but more primarily, we might think it is undertaken for the sake of the world, for the sake of humanity. That's the real reason, it seems to me, that initiation is undertaken by the neophyte who is treading the pathway, because every initiation increases his faculties, brings out that which is latent, that which is waiting to express itself, because after initiation he has much wider responsibilities. He has work on a much grander level, a much more cosmical scale, less restricted, but therefore needing much greater faculties, much greater understanding, much greater awareness, and these things come to him through initiation. I would like to touch on an analogy that I have used with other groups like this, and I think that it is a good one. Imagine a cactus. The cactus has a beautiful flower, and the one that I'm thinking of just now is the night blooming cereus, and we've had one. In fact, Kenny has it now. I hope it has bloomed for you, Kenny. But a bud would appear, maybe 2, and we would wait. And that bud appeared out of that woody stem, and there was rather olive green leaves, nothing very much to look at. But slowly that bud would appear. And little by little it would grow, and we would wonder, is this the night it's going to bloom? We'd still have to wait. It's a matter of growth, a matter of development, a matter of self-expression of that plant. Finally, it blooms. And out of that plant, which through most of the year is not very much to look at, the leaves are fresh, green when they first come out. They rather soon turn to an olive green. The stem gets rather woody, and it doesn't attract much attention till those buds come. And the astonishing thing is that out of that plant comes a flower of the most exquisite beauty and purity, and the fragrance fills the atmosphere. It is a beautiful thing to behold, and out of that plant, that flower came. Now that is what initiation is. Out of this human being, and as we look at ourselves, the very thing that is going to nourish the plant is the very type of study that we are engaged in now. These thoughts are the nourishment that the human plant hungers for, the human plant needs for its growth. And when that bud finally blooms, he has passed through those first 3 levels of the lesser mysteries. He has stepped across the boundary, and he has undertaken the first initiation of the greater mysteries. And one might say of him, not at all facetiously, but nevertheless with a great deal of truth, we didn't know he had it in him. And it's that wonderful flower of spiritual power, enlightenment, knowledge, and the ability to transmit that knowledge in the form of teachings. That's what it is that makes the genuine teacher or the initiate. And I'm going to try to be a little more specific shortly on this because it'll be the climax of our study. But now, after making his journey along the spiritual orbit, as it were, he is then passing perhaps through several lifetimes of service. And the mark of such a one giving this type of service is utter self-resignation to the greatest work of all, the work of the hierarchy of compassion, which is only represented on this earth by the Brotherhood of the Adepts, the White Lodge, call it by whatever name you will. That is a very small portion of the hierarchy of compassion. It is that portion which touches the earth. Very, very important. Without it, we would lose touch with the hierarchy of compassion. But it is there. However, his utter self-resignation to the work of the hierarchy of compassion is such because he knows it goes far deeper into the very heart of nature than this mere association of the adepts. However many there may be, they represent on earth something that is absolutely cosmical in its reaches. And in the course of time, perhaps we will come to know how it affects the entire earth in its makeup as a globe chain. I hope that I'm not using terms that are unfamiliar, and if so, perhaps some of you will ask questions. But the solar system as a whole, the galaxy as a whole, and beyond, the hierarchy of compassion is rooted in the very heart of being itself. And that is what is so wonderful about the type of service that the initiate gives. And if we think that because the initiate has passed through his initiations and learns to master himself, first of all, then the laws of nature, which he recognizes as being an extension of himself, that he can do whatever he likes. Far from it. He is bound by his obligations to the grand hierarchy of compassion that is cosmical in a way that we can't even begin to understand. And they exemplify in their own lives what they try to train their students to do, to give dedication, self-dedication, not to themselves as people, but to the great work. Now the wonder of it all is that within each one of us, because each of us is a mystery school in his own right, if he only wakes to the fact and sees it for himself, because each one of us is a mystery school with our own outer court, our own temple, the temple of the mind, the temple of the heart, and the Holy of Holies, which is the Atman, the universality in ourselves, we have within us even now that which links us to the hierarchy of compassion. That is why we are interested in these things. That's just why we've come together to study them. Now, coming to the spring, then, the great event as pictured in the Christian tradition is the crucifixion and the resurrection. Now, notice that in this particular story, the resurrection took place 3 days later. Now this, of course, again, is simply a tale out of the mystery schools. Some of the initiations, we are told, last for 2 weeks. Some of them, for some reasons, may last only 3 days. Those reasons are beyond our ability to either understand or to try to explain. But in this resurrection, we have a very remarkable and an interesting fact of initiation. The human being on this cosmic cross, at the time he is going into his initiation, he goes into what corresponds on a much larger scale to what we know of as a trance. But it is unlike any trance that is induced by a hypnotist or self-hypnosis or by mediumship. It doesn't resemble these at all. It is a trance in which the initiant, in going through the process, must leave his body, but the body is sustained and kept alive. He goes into this, first of all, because he is ready. In these preliminary stages of training, he is taught not only about his own nature, not only about the nature of the universe of which he is a part, but also what he is to expect. He is taught about the mysteries of life and death. And after all, there is no opposite of life and death. It is all life. But he is taught all of this. He is taught in detail some of the greatest mysteries of death, because initiation is death. He must go through the experiences of death with his eyes open. And we, in our present level of evolution, we go into the experiences of death with our eyes shut, and we dream the deep dreams of the Devachan, as we are taught. But in that deep sleep of the Devachan, we are completely unaware of the adventures of the highest part of us, the divine self, which has magnificent adventures in the after-death state. In initiation, the neophyte must go through this with his eyes open. He must see for himself what life and death really are. Then, if he has been successful, the body awakens. That is represented by the resurrection. The body awakens, he returns as an adept. And this will happen with all of these 4 levels of initiation, each one, however, going into the mysteries of the structure of the universe to an ever greater degree, because it is a matter of growth. His ability to understand increases. Life after life after life of dedicated service, further study, further investigation, further research into his own inner God, which is the universality within himself, he is able to then undergo greater and greater and greater initiations. And in the greatest of them, we're taught, he allies himself with the hierarchy of compassion in its most cosmical sense. Whereas we, in our present level of study and learning, we are aware only from the books that we have, from the Mahatma letters, from the writings of H.P. Blavatsky, and as a student of Jita Parukar, we have learned of the existence of the masters, the Mahatmas. We have learned of their teachings. We read them for ourselves. But we cannot see beyond that. But those who comprise the Brotherhood of the Adepts see far beyond. And in their higher initiations, higher and higher as they go, they come closer and closer and closer to the cosmical aspect of the hierarchy of compassion. Now, this is something that we have been taught. Again, I'm going to speak of this rose at the center of the cross. Of course, the Rosicrucian was a very, very interesting order in its inception. And for those who have any access to Volume 1 of William Quan Judge's magazine, The Path, in Volume 1, there is an account of the Rosicrucian order, an account of the teachings of the Rosicrucians. It's a magnificent document, and anyone who can possibly get a hold of that should certainly read it, not once, but perhaps many times. It is filled with esoteric teaching. So this makes a very wonderful symbol. Now, I'm going to enlarge this a little by just making 3 divisions, calling this then what we generally call body, but we recognize, those who have studied the 7 principles of man, that you can expand it into 7. You can expand it according to the level of your study. But for what we're doing right now, this is adequate. And then the human monad himself, the re-embodying entity, would be this central part, which in the terminology of St. Paul, body, soul, and spirit, would come under the general word of soul, but in itself it comprises many levels of consciousness, merging into the spirit. Now, this we call Atman and Buddhi, Manas, and then so on and so on. But we're going to be concerned with these. Those who are familiar with the terms Atman, the universal self, Buddhi, spiritual discrimination, the actual teacher within, the guide, the one who does teach. And this is, as DDP put it, our plank of salvation. This is the constitution of man. But the whole purpose of initiation is that the monad shall develop these things for itself, because everything is composite. There's nothing simple in the universe. Although the broad outline, the broad statement of the teachings, it may be simple. Everything is composite. And so the human monad has within itself potentially a Buddhic intelligence, potentially an Atman, or the inner God. Not only this inner God and this Buddhi, but potentially here. And in the account of the cry on the cross, there were 2 cries on the cross. The first one in substance, "O my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" That means that in initiation, the initiant, the neophyte, is left strictly on his own. The Atman does not need initiation. It passed through it ages and ages and ages ago when it was here in its evolutionary pathway. The Buddhi, the Buddhic principle, does not need initiation. It is the man who needs initiation, the human being. And in that, for the time being, he no longer has the flow of divine life that we all have from the inner God. It is temporarily shut off, we might say, because he has to be on his own. He has to win through by his own efforts. No one, nothing can aid him. It must be done by he himself. Only he can do his own growing. So when he says, "Oh my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" he is left with a complete sense of loneliness, complete aloneness. And in that experience of initiation, when he goes out, and he has to go out with his eyes open, and probe the secrets of the universe. He comes back with a light that he did not have before. He comes back with the manifestation of what was previously latent within him. And he comes back with that light which is his own inner God. Not the inner God of his seven principles, but his own inner God of the human monad. Then he gives the second cry on the cross. O God of me, not my God, but God of me, how thou dost glorify me. Then you have this, and you have the completed cross. And that there is the real significance and the real meaning of the cross. And so this, as one of the 4 sacred seasons, is a very, very important time for us to reflect on these things. And even though the actual experiences of initiation seem to be very remote to us where we are now, it is something for us to realize that even now we have that within us which will someday be initiated. We have it within us, which is our link with the hierarchy of compassion, if we will only find it, recognize it for what it is, foster its growth, identify ourselves with it, and move along. Then these sacred seasons become a reality to us. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Must be some questions.
Yes, I do have a question. What was the second word that Jesus said on the cross tonight?
You asked me for the Hebrew?
The one you said and mentioned tonight.
Yes. Well, the first one was, oh my God, the Atman here. Because it is the Atman, Buddhi, Manas, Kama, and so forth, of the 7 principles, to him that is my God. But when this one was manifest as the result of initiation, that was the God of me, the God that is a part of my human self, how thou dost glorify me.
I think there might be one thing that might be confusing there. It's not, if you look in the New Testament, you won't find 2 phrases that he said. It's 2 different ways of pointing the Hebrew words that you can be read in 2 different manners. And the reason, that's a Kabbalistic way of learning something out from the Hebrew. Better?
Now, is there any significance in the fact that Christmas is a fixed date and Easter is a variable date?
That is just a matter of convenience.
But
There's no
prevalence
significance.
date, yeah.
The real significance is in the phases of the moon related to the sacred seasons, the equinoxes and the solstices. And the most favorable condition, we're taught, is when the new moon comes on the day of any solstice or equinox, the full moon 2 weeks thereafter is the most favorable situation. Oh, that's an animal. That's an animal monad.
Well, that's close to right now then, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We've just
Because I
passed
just looked up and the moon looks to be about the first quarter right
Yes,
now.
yes. And the equinox did take place, wasn't it, 2 days ago? Yes.
Are we to infer from this that the initiation, the actual initiation, can only take place at the point when the full moon coincides with the equinox, or is that just the most favorable time for success in initiation?
I would be inclined to say that minor initiations could take place anytime. But when you are moving into the greater initiations, then they would be at these times of the solstices and the equinoxes, and probably the greatest of them would wait until the conditions are the most favorable. I would think, that's only an opinion, since you put the question. I have no factual knowledge of it. Well, we shouldn't force questions just for the sake of asking them. And if there is a lull in the questions, I like to think it's because we've all had so much to think about. And that's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Rodney?
What would be the significance of the the solstices and the equinoxes as they occur, like in the southern hemisphere? Would it be
I just
the
knew
opposite?
that question would come. Well, that is a technical point that I wouldn't prepare to answer with any authority at all. I could only say what I would think about it, and don't take it as having any more meaning than that. I'm inclined that the initiations would be the same because it has to do actually with the direction of the North Pole toward the sun or away from the sun. I think the criterion there is the northern hemisphere, but it doesn't follow that someone living in the southern hemisphere would pack his bags and move to somewhere in the north if he was to be initiated. I think that could take place anywhere.
Do you remember offhand how often new moons coincide with equinoxes or solstices?
Well, there is a cycle of about 19 years. And in the case of the 19-year cycle, the phases of the moon follow the leap years in exactly the same order all over again. And what bearing that might have on just when a new moon would fall on an equinox, it's difficult to say, because the new moon is dependent on so many things, not only its the moon's own journey on its path around the Earth. That's only part of it. But the Earth on its orbit means that it's at a different point on the moon's path when it is going to dip down into what I like to call the plane of the ecliptic as the surface of the ecliptic ocean, or known as a node of the moon, when it is dipping down. That is why, incidentally, it is called the ecliptic, because at that moment, the moon can eclipse the sun, the new moon, when it is dipping down into the plane of the ecliptic. Now, I couldn't give you offhand, but there are ways of looking it up in the Nautical Almanac, and I suppose the computers have worked it out, just how often that's likely to happen. But it's a very complicated thing because nothing is regular. The path of the Earth's orbit is an ellipse. The path of the moon's orbit is an ellipse. And all these little variations have a bearing on your question. So I don't think it necessarily comes with exact regularity. I'm not sure that the answer really is responsive, but it's the best I can do.
Doug?
You said that the beginning of when the initiate goes through his fourth initiation, it can be many lifetimes before he goes through his fifth.
It could be. It depends entirely on him, the degree of his growth, the rate at which he grows, and also the needs of not only himself, but of his responsibilities. Everything has to work out at the right time, not only from his own standpoint, but also from the standpoint of the larger responsibilities he undertakes. And I suppose many factors might come into play there, but he certainly wouldn't move on into the next one until he is ready. You have to judge each case probably on its own merits.
Are any of these initiations connected with what we call syzygy?
Oh, certainly. Syzygy in this case means a straight line from the sun out to the planets. And we are taught that there is a definite relationship there. Mercury and Venus, of course, would come between the Earth and the sun and the other planets. The details on that are not given out with any completeness that I'm aware of. But it's a good question nonetheless.
Are there special initiations at the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox?
Yes, at the summer solstice, as I understand it from teachings that have been given to us, at the summer solstice, the initiate, once he has passed through this one, which would be called the fifth if you're counting the three preliminary grades, he then becomes what is known as, well, he takes his place in the guardian wall, as it is called. And the guardian wall doesn't mean that he is fixed like a stone in a wall, fastened with mortar in a rigid place at all. It means the type of work he is doing. And the guardian wall is a kind of a protective aspect of their work. The hierarchy of compassion, the adepts, as being the closest representatives to us, cannot interfere with the world's karma, cannot prevent humanity from accepting the results of its own mistakes, its own misdeeds. And we are building mountains of karma for ourselves faster than we can work through them. Something like the national debt. Faster than we can pay it off. But an illustration that seems to be good to me is that if you've ever seen around certain places like storage tanks for gasoline or oil or gas tanks, there are lightning rods. And the lightning rods drain off the electric charges between the clouds and the earth before they can become destructive lightning bolts that would set fire to the whole thing. That's the purpose of lightning rods. It cannot prevent the buildup of potential between the clouds and the earth. That potential is there. It's got to work its way through. But the lightning rods can and do permit that potential to leak its way through in such amounts that will not destroy the equipment that is being protected. And it is possible that the guardian wall allows the human race to take as much carbon as it has to without the destructive amounts that could completely destroy humanity altogether. It's one way in my own mind that I seem to see one aspect at least of the work of the guardian wall. Of course, they're teaching all the time, not only their own students, but passing on through their students to the world the teachings, as was evidenced, of course, in the coming of H.P. Blavatsky, as other great teachers before her.
There is no meeting next Sunday. We continue classes throughout the week, and we have several new classes starting in April. The program will be out sometime next week, so you can watch your mail anxiously for it. We have a very, very interesting lineup of programs next month as well, with a couple celebrations. In one in particular, we're going to be celebrating the Wesak Festival here, the full moon, next month with a meditation all night. Keep track of that one, and we'll be glad to have you come and meditate with us. Other than that, if there are no more questions, well, thank you for coming, and please feel free to browse to the library and the bookstore and do what you please.